Welcome to the Operation Weed Eradication Report. I'm Brownfield anchor reporter Megan Grebner. With us is Katie Stratham with BASF. Today we're going to talk more about weed resistance and herbicide resistance specifically. As we get into our conversation today, how did we get to this point to where this is one of the biggest challenges growers face year after year?
So when we think about weeds in the field, resistance isn't just something that popped up out of nowhere. It already exists. And we're just seeing more of it now because we've applied the same selection pressure. What does that mean? What is selection pressure? Selection pressure means doing the same thing for control over and over again, and eventually weeding out the weeds that are susceptible to that selection pressure and only leaving behind the ones that were already tolerant to it to begin with. So that's kind of how we've gotten where we are, by doing that same thing over and over and leaving only the weeds that could already withstand it in our fields.
So this kind of comes at a time where we need to shake things up when it comes to managing our weeds. But what do we do with them? Do we manage them? Do we control them? How do we get to a point where this isn't such a big economic pressure for producers every year?
Absolutely. That's a fun thing to think about. You know, what are we doing to our weeds? Are we managing them? When I think of a manager, I think of, my boss who oversees me. So are we overseeing our weeds, or are we controlling them? Are we giving them rules and trying to make them stay within the line? Maybe, but really with Operation Weed Eradication, the idea is to change that mindset. And we think about what the word eradicate means. It means to remove completely. And that's our goal, right? Is to remove pigweed completely from our fields, to alleviate some of that stress that we face in the growing season.
So let's talk about Operation Weed Eradication and specifically what it's helping growers do and its purpose to maybe provide some guidance for farmers around the country.
Yeah, so the idea behind Operation Weed Eradication is to help people open their minds to more management strategies, as well as to kind of have a sharing of ideas, learn from other areas of the country, learn from other people who have tried different strategies and had them work. So it's not just about applying that same selection pressure. It's about still maybe using some herbicides, but using multiple effective sites of action where we're able to. We want to incorporate other sorts of management as well. So cultural practices, things like tillage, even as far as some fields in Kansas get hand weeded, right? If we run out of opportunities, we're late enough in the growing season that we can't use any sort of herbicide, we can't use any sort of tillage, we may send people out there to actually rogue those weeds, because as part of Operation Weed Eradication, even that last weed standing, that's the most critical to preventing seed to go back into that seed bank to give us problems for years to come.
So when we're looking at the Operation Weed Eradication program and what BASF is doing, how are you working with growers, and maybe what practices are you encouraging growers to implement on their operations to prevent weed control, weed management, and ultimately then eradication?
Yeah, so every situation is going to be a little bit different. I mean, out here in Kansas, we have widespread pigweed, both Palmer amaranth and common water hemp, which are two of the most aggressive weeds that we face today in row crops. And we also have widespread resistance to multiple sites of action. So when it comes to coming up with maybe a chemical program, we have fewer options out here. We need to try and find multiple effective sites of action for our fields, but we don't have as many effective sites of action as people in other parts of the country might. So then it comes down to really working with that individual grower, that individual operation, and seeing what's right for them. I mean, out here in Kansas, we have a lot of folks that practice no-till or reduced till or minimum till. So trying to incorporate tillage or some sort of tillage-like practice for weed control can be a little difficult. And that's where it comes into, maybe we end up using some other sort of practice. Maybe we have those hand roguing or crews go through our fields. Another really important part that I think gets overlooked is not just managing our feeds not just eradicating the weeds in the field, but also looking at the areas surrounding the field. One of the things that I see more often than not is a lot of pressure coming in from those field edges, as well as where we have irrigation. I like to call it pivot road pigweed problems. If we're not managing or controlling or eradicating the weeds on our pivot roads, that's going to be a great source of seed to have those other problems. So it really goes grower to grower, working with local teams, trying to come up with the best solution for that acre. And then another really important aspect of from just the chemical side is making sure that we're utilizing not only post-effective options, but also pre-effective options and layering in residuals. So we always talk about the easiest weed to control is the one with a growing point of 1, the one that's not up yet. And so making sure that we're getting those weeds when they're most vulnerable before they have time to put on size and really have some tolerance built up to possibly survive our applications.
It's really a great reminder that that one last weed standing is probably the most critical, most crucial one that we make sure doesn't come back.
Absolutely.
Katie, anything else for us today?
No, I would say that if growers are interested, or even retailers or agronomists are interested in learning more about Operation Weed Eradication, they can visit our website, operationweederadication.com, to see, what's going on with BASF's initiative and who else is involved.
Katie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Megan.
I'm Megan Grebner with the Operation Weed Eradication Report on Brownfield.